So good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Mihok. I'm a Russell resident, and I've been here for about 18 years. And what I plan to do is essentially share my experiences with you on the kinds of wild, edible berry trees or shrubs that exist in our area, and kind of open up your mind a little bit to doing something different. So unfortunately, you won't hear anything at all about maybe what you're interested in, which is blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, because I literally have never grown them myself. I have no practical experience, but I have a lot of practical experience on these other things, partly because I've participated in this community group, Trees for Tomorrow, and we have done some interesting things in town, and I'll tell you about those things. Next slide. So again, you nibble on berries in the woods, but there's a lot more going on when you plant berries in your berry trees in your backyard. So berries galore to eat, but flowers. And a lot of these interesting species here have very nice white flowers in the spring when it's kind of dull and not much is happening. So they're the first sign of color in the spring that's really nice. The birds benefit greatly from any of these wild berry bushes. They devour many of the things that we're also interested in, and we essentially compete with them. The insects that are beneficial even for your vegetable garden are sometimes around in your berry bushes. And this is a bee, you think, but it isn't. It's actually a syrphid fly. It's a different kind of fly that's imitating a bee, and it's a nectar feeder that will be feeding on the flowers in your yard. The bushes you plant will provide habitat for predators and parasitoids of little bugs that go after your garden vegetables and other things that you're interested in. So there's a lot more going on when you plant a small bush or a tree than just the berries you might want to eat. And then, the ultimate goal for someone like me is to make a lot of jam or jelly, or occasionally to make some wine. Next slide. So if you want to educate yourself about these things, Trees for Tomorrow in particular has done something that I think is very useful. With the Horticultural Society, the Scouts, the Russell Township, South Nation Conservation, many partners, we did two things a couple of years ago. We put in a small showcase garden by Mother Teresa's school of interesting plants, and we put in a lot of small seedlings, native species, along the bike path in that same area. And as of last year, all of these are labeled. So I've got an example of one of the labels, and you can just explore on your own to see what is planted. And of course, if you recognize familiar things like wild plums, you can just find them wherever you happen to be wandering around. Next slide. So if you really want to work at identifying things in the wild as opposed to buying them from stores, spring is the best time to look. And in the month of May, you have a sequence of different plants coming out, starting around May the 10th. Plums very early, serviceberries also very early, and that's why people like to plant serviceberries in their yards, because when it's brown and gray in the spring, your serviceberries are in flower, and they're very showy. And sometimes towards basically the end of June, the last sort of berry bush comes out, the elderberries. The berries, again, follow roughly the same sequence, not exactly, and they differ a lot depending on the weather every year. But sometime in early July and onwards into probably even the beginning of September, you can pick berries of all sorts. Next slide. So this is the warning, which you have to give anyone who ventures into this area if they aren't a biologist. So some things are familiar, some things aren't. And you have the resources you need to identify wild berries and wild berry bushes. Books like The Trees in Canada, which I use all the time. And another book which I've never seen but looks perfect, Wild Berries in Ontario. So I haven't seen it yet, but it's probably just exactly what you need to identify edible berries in the bush. But definitely Trees in Canada gives you the technical information you need to identify what you might be interested in. But you have to be careful because there are many lookalikes. So even poison ivy has berries. I can't imagine anyone being crazy enough to pick a poison ivy berry, but someone might do it one day. Elderberries, and there are a lot of them around here, are mainly black, but they're kind of black-purple and they're kind of red at the beginning. But there's another species called the red elderberry, which is emetic or actually poisonous. And there are ones that are more, emetic, I'd say. They make you throw up as to being really dangerous. And I think those are mainly the ones that I've put on the screen here. But there are other ones that are truly poisonous. And so you do have to educate yourself. And be aware that if you're going to eat a large quantity of something, make sure you know what it is that you're eating by identifying it properly. Next slide. So what I'll do is I'll go through sort of my personal favorites in order of what I think is interesting and what you can actually do here in Russell, because Russell is not perfect in terms of its climate or its soils for everything. So my all-time favorite is the Serviceberry. It's a very native species. There are different kinds, and it likes this kind of wet, heavy clay soil that we have. It doesn't require an awful lot of sun. It's tolerant of many things that aren't the best in our Russell area. And you have choices when you go to a store. You can buy Allegheny Serviceberries or Downy Serviceberries. You can be adventurous like I am and grow them from seed. And you can buy a hybrid as well at certain nurseries called Autumn Brilliance, which is more of a tree type of Serviceberry. It's been bred to have a single trunk and turn into a largish tree. And here you can see in the autumn it turns this nice brilliant scarlet. And in my front yard you can see what it looks like around May the 15th. A really showy tree, very early for the bees and so on, lots of white flowers. And unfortunately, it's very hard to get a picture of the ripe berries of a Serviceberry, so I have pictures of green berries there because the birds don't have a lot to eat at that time of the year in June and getting into early July, and they essentially eat all the Serviceberries before you ever get to pick them, except in really good years. So I've actually only made a little bit of Serviceberry jam in 17 years of growing Serviceberries in Russell. I keep on planting more and more, and the birds just eat more and more. Next slide. Here's what can happen if you're really lucky. There's an absolutely beautiful Allegheny Serviceberry at the Arboretum. And it's right in a very conspicuous place, growing as a very, very large tree. And at the Canadian Museum of Nature Natural Heritage Campus in Gatineau, they have about 150 of smaller Allegheny Serviceberries also growing all around the front parking lot and the general grounds there. So this is what you can achieve, but it's difficult to get this right, and it's because the taxonomy is very confusing. These Serviceberries interbreed with each other, and so getting something that grows into a tree instead of a multi-stemmed shrub is a bit of an art. So next slide. So what I would prefer to grow, this is actually my number one choice for what to grow here in Russell, is very difficult. So Saskatoons, which are like Serviceberries in the same genus, are found in Western Canada, and people who live there know them because you pick them in river valleys, and they're just everywhere. You just don't grow them yourself, you just pick them. But here, this plant doesn't like our humid, cloudy, wet summers. It likes a lot of sunshine, it likes well-drained soils, and it's tough. It really suffers from these leaf and berry rusts here. It doesn't suffer too much from this juniper rust because we don't have a lot of junipers. And you can grow them and you can get berries because I do eat them from my backyard, but it's difficult to get enough. And the farm where you used to be able to buy them, the Ovens Berry Farm in Osgood, is now closed. They were very successful. They found the perfect spot to grow this plant. I am embarking on a new adventure, so like Owen, I have set up a seed bed. I have about 6,000 seeds in that bed as of last fall, and the snow just melted right now. And so I've taken a look at what I've achieved, and so far nothing has interfered. So the rodents and the squirrels and whatever haven't dug anything up. There's Saskatoon, Serviceberries, Chokecherries, all sorts of things in there, which I hope to grow up so that in about 2 years, again, they might be available for other people, because I can't use them myself. We'll see what happens. Next slide. This is an easy one to get started with, the Chokecherry, because it's a tough plant that's adapted for our area. It has a very tart berry, so it's not exactly a nibbling berry. You have to have an acquired taste for that, but it does grow very easily, and it's very easy to identify, and you can't get it wrong very much in terms of other things that might look like chokecherries. The glossy buckthorn, unfortunately, is one of them that does look a bit like a chokecherry. And when you do it well and you find the perfect spot, I have a 10-year-old tree here. It's 2 trees that formed a bit of a grove after about 10 years. About maybe 5 years ago, I got about 20 pounds of chokecherries, literally from those 2 trees that I bought for maybe $15 and then put in my backyard. And if you want to grow them from seed, again, at about 2 years of age, you get a fairly decent-sized plant that you can move to somewhere else from a seed bed. Next slide. Elderberries. That's probably one of my all-time favorites in terms of being tough. It's a bit of a pain because the berries are small, but I eat them in yogurt and on ice cream and whatever. I made a huge quantity of wine. I love elderberry jelly. It's a plant that will sucker and produce a lot of baby elderberries. It seems to tolerate the presence of black walnut, which can be a problem. And really, it likes, I think, this area, even though it dies back a little bit in the winter because it's more of a southern species. Next slide. Currants and cranberries most people know, and they are here, and I don't know why they aren't more common. The high bush cranberry grows wild, and it's very easy to find. The red and the black currants are a bit more difficult to find. They're more like what you would find in people's gardens. And like anything that tastes good, the birds really do demolish them. We have excellent black currants in particular in that showcase garden by Mother Teresa's school. Very large quantities of berries produced there over the last couple of years. The cranberries are interesting because they're there through most of the winter, and they are nice as a nibble, and if you want to, you can make cranberry jelly from them. Next slide. These are two other cherries that are interesting. The black cherry is a true tree, so can get up to about 22 meters high, lives for 150 years, tends to grow up in the understory in a lot of forests here or along forest edges. The birds eat the berries, and I don't have pictures of the berries because of that. I'm working on it. The pin cherry is more common. It's everywhere, and the birds, again, disperse the seeds. So you'll find them along roadsides, you'll find them along the path, you'll find them out by the Russell landfill. And it's a very easy tree to identify because of its kind of distinctive red bark. The black cherry looks very much like a chokecherry, and you have to look very closely at its characteristics to know that that thing that's maybe 6 or 8 feet tall is actually a black cherry, and one day it'll be a really big, very nice tree. Next slide. So unfortunately, all of these things are just like any other plant. They do have disease problems. I haven't run into too many so far. The one that's a big worry, because I have invested a lot in cherries in general, is this black knot fungus. And it's here, and you have to basically remove it whenever you see it, because it will be a serious problem. Something called the white pine blister rust is a problem of the genus Ribase, the gooseberries and the currants. And they recommend you simply don't plant gooseberries and currants where you have white pines. Now, Russell has white pines everywhere. Now, people have been successful in growing these other plants, so I'm not sure what the status is here, but I haven't seen it as a problem so far. Next slide. And they're all good eats. Now, this is the reality, unfortunately. There's some things you just simply cannot manipulate. Things like rabbits and rodents and so on are going to cause you a little bit of grief, and it depends on what you plant. If you plant high bush blueberry, they really have to be protected. Rabbits will go after them and just nibble them down almost continuously, and they will never actually grow up very big unless you're very lucky. The serviceberries and Saskatoons are a bit like that. Small rodents, I haven't had trouble too much yet, but they're there in the winter especially, and you'll find when the snow melts that, you might have some damage. And lastly, birds. If you're truly trying to get berries for yourself and you're not interested in nature conservation, well, you're going to have to fight with the birds. And I truly recommend giving up on any ideas about keeping the birds away from your berries, because they don't really work. If you use bird netting, all you do is kill birds, which is not good. If you're a professional, you have special bird scaring devices, little cannons and things like that, which the Elderberry farm, for example, did use for their Saskatoons. And they do work, but you wouldn't do that at home, I don't think. Next slide. So advice about where to plant and what will fit where and so on. I'm not able to really do proper soil analyses and so on. I've just used these kind of home hardware test kits to give you a bit of an idea of what's going on. And if you buy triple mix, like up here on the left from someone, you're going to get a very nutritious medium, and that's what we put in the showcase garden, for example. If you go to your backyard, you're going to be more along the lines of what I have on the 2 panels here. You're going to have soils that don't have a lot of nitrogen, don't have a lot of potassium. They're probably going to have a lot of phosphorus, and the pH is not going to be too far off from neutral, a little bit alkaline most of the time. Every now and then you hit the jackpot, like where I planted those 2 chokecherry bushes. They just thrive there, and for whatever reason that spot is perfect. It has a lot of potassium, and that might be one of the reasons. Where I've had absolutely gigantic elderberries, same thing, an awful lot of potassium in that well-rotted soil, I guess. If, like I say, you can do anything about it, find a place with sun, find good drainage, make sure you have good air circulation, do some housekeeping to get rid of diseased parts of plants, prune the plants to encourage growth, and do operate on sort of what I call an integrated pest management basis. So don't just cut all your grass, don't turn your backyard into a field of grass. Leave sort of some natural areas for predators and parasites, which will live in those natural areas and will actually benefit the other plants that you put into your backyard. So next slide. Viburnums are an interesting choice as well, but some of the berries aren't all that interesting. Nannyberry thrives very well here, but the berries are really mealy most of the year and they have a really big pit. I've managed to make juice and an attempt at jelly from them, but most years I don't find them to be very good, but they're a great tree to plant with nice berries that the birds love, and the berries do sit there over the winter. Arrowwoods are very rare here, and we've had trouble establishing them in our little Trees for Tomorrow project, and it's largely because of this leaf beetle that was introduced into our area around 1978 from Asia, and it's causing chaos in terms of defoliating all the viburnums. Next slide. Canada plum is a great tree. I haven't grown too many. I've grown two in a very bad spot in my backyard, so they never have gotten very big. They flower before everything else. They're really pretty in the spring. They produce nice plums, not kind of the commercial plums you get in the store, but very nice plums. And they aren't perfect. So this little bug, this plum curculio, will go after them a lot. So you cannot be picky about eating the absolute perfect fruit if you're going to grow this kind of wild plum. Next slide. This is something I don't have much experience with, but I'm learning. The sweetberry honeysuckle, a new plant. Tastes like a sour blueberry. It's the very first berry that we ever get here in our Russell area. So it's out, let's say, even in mid-June or early June. And it's rather inconspicuous because the berries are sort of under the green leaves. And like other things that come out very early, the birds go after them just continuously. So you'll just, literally every time you approach a bush, you'll find a robin in that bush eating the berries. But you can get them, and they taste really good. And it's the result of a horticultural effort, basically, to hybridize some species. Next slide. Wild grapes are here. Not too many people use them because they aren't really good nibbles. They're kind of, oh, that tastes sour. They're really, desperation nibbles, but they are very nutritious and so on, and they make wonderful jelly. And they're kind of weedy, so you can grow them along your own fence line, or they'll plant themselves as well. And one warning, big red flag here, the Virginia creeper looks almost exactly the same. You have that same purple-black berry growing along a fence line, whatever. Just the shape is different, the leaves are different. So don't mistake the two because you'll probably throw up if you eat the Virginia creeper and it's not a wild grape. So next slide. A couple of odds and sods. Aronia, most people don't know it. I've grown it for the first time and made jelly from it once. Nice berry, but to me it's very uninteresting. It doesn't have a special, unique flavor or whatever, but it grows well here. Hawthorn trees are wonderful. There don't seem to be many of them around here, and I think it's because of the cedar apple rust. We have a lot of apple trees around here, and that affects the hawthorns. But there are nice hawthorns around, and there are a couple of beautiful trees in Hogsback Park in Ottawa where you can get a huge harvest of hawthorns. And they're good for everything. They taste good, they make jam, jelly, they make punches, whatever. Next slide. So rowanberry trees, those funny orange berries, guess what? They're edible. I've made jam and jelly out of them for many years, usually after frost to get rid of the bitter flavor. There's sort of an acquired taste there, I guess, and I say they taste a bit weird. They taste a bit turpentine-y like Labrador tea does, but people like Labrador tea. So it shouldn't discourage you from giving it a try. And the birds definitely eat those eventually as the winter progresses. And once I made wine from it, which no one else would drink but myself. But I did enjoy it. And it's that odd turpentine-y flavor that turns some people off. So if you don't taste bitter, if you're a coffee drinker, for example, you don't really taste bitter. And you might like rowan berries. But if you're a tea drinker, you probably don't like rowan berries. Next slide. So resources, just as Owen said, absolutely wonderful book. That's really where I've invested a lot of my time learning from that book, Growing Trees from Seed here in Russell. You can grow things like Saskatoons in the bottom left there from seed, and it's something that requires patience. You get something that might only be 3-4 inches high in that first year. Some other things like chokecherries will grow really fast in sod. You put in a bare root seedling that you buy for $1.50, $2 from a big nursery, and you have to wait 3 years or so before you really see a lot happening. There's tons of information on the internet. So as far as resources go, they're all there for someone to educate themselves. I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm a wildlife biologist. I'm not a botanist. So everything I've told you today, I've learned on my own, basically, and by listening to people like Owen and Marcel and whoever when I get the chance. And definitely, I encourage you to visit the plants that Trees for Tomorrow and others have planted here in Russell. The fitness trail right near where we are right now and that little showcase garden at Mother Teresa's school have labeled plants, and the fruits are there for you. No one owns, the fruits of all those plants that we've put in, and I would say probably either this year or next year we're going to see something a little bit more interesting. Definitely more flowers in the spring and hopefully a lot more berries. Right now there are kind of chokecherries and elderberries that are the visible results of our efforts, and that's about all. So next slide. And if you're feeling really adventuresome, you just go out into the bush and look for interesting things. So everyone knows the traditional blueberry, but there's more than one kind of blueberry. You can walk into a bog and you can find this interesting berry, which is just another blueberry, the bog bilberry. So in there and entertain questions, yeah.